My dear brothers and sisters, we live in a time where everyone is busy looking at others, what they wear, how they live, what they achieve, and even how they fail. But Islam teaches us something far more powerful: focus on yourself. The Prophet reminded us that the wise person is the one who holds himself accountable before he is held accountable by Allah. That means instead of spending hours speaking about other people's faults, our energy should be directed inward towards our own hearts, our own actions, and our own relationship with Allah. Self-accountability is the foundation of true growth in Islam, and without it, a believer risks falling into heedlessness. When we speak about focusing on ourselves, it means turning the mirror inward before ever pointing a finger outward. It is easy to notice the flaws of others, to criticize their behavior, and to highlight their mistakes, but much harder to sit quietly and examine our own shortcomings with honesty. Yet this is exactly what Allah and His Messenger have guided us towards. The Prophet, he said, "The wise person is the one who calls himself to account and works for what comes after death. And the foolish one is the one who follows his desires and then hopes upon Allah." This hadith alone captures the essence of self-accountability. It is wisdom to look at yourself before it is too late, and it is foolishness to ignore your faults while expecting success in the hereafter. When a believer practices self-accountability, he begins to discover a powerful truth: the greatest enemy is not the world outside, but the weaknesses within. Our nafs self constantly pulls us towards desires, towards negligence, and towards sins. If we are not checking ourselves daily, we slowly drift further from Allah without even realizing it. That is why the early scholars of Islam used to spend their nights reflecting on their actions during the day. They would sit quietly, asking themselves, did I pray with khushu? Did I waste time in idle talk? Did I hurt someone with my words? Did I commit a sin in private when no one was watching but Allah? This habit of deep self-reflection created men and women who were strong in character, humble in spirit, and determined to improve. Growth never comes from blaming others. A person can spend his entire life complaining about society, about his family, about his friends, or about circumstances, but none of that will bring change. Real change begins when you look at your own role, your own decisions, and your own response to trials. Allah will not ask us on the day of judgment about how much we criticize others, but He will ask about our prayers, our fasting, our honesty, our dealings, and our responsibilities. This means every moment we spend focusing on others is time stolen from our own self-development. Self-accountability also protects us from arrogance. When we are busy monitoring our own flaws, we have no time to feel superior to others. We realize that no matter how good we may appear, there are always hidden weaknesses that only Allah knows about. This brings humility, and humility is loved by Allah. A person who constantly evaluates himself does not rush to judge others because he knows how much work he himself still needs to do. He sees others with compassion rather than arrogance because his focus is on his own spiritual journey. Moreover, self-accountability strengthens our connection with Allah. Every time you pause and evaluate your actions, you are reminding yourself of your standing before Him. You are training your heart to remember that nothing is hidden from Him. The more you hold yourself accountable now, the lighter your accountability will be on the day of judgment. As one of the righteous predecessors said, the believer is a guardian over himself. He holds himself accountable for Allah's sake. The reckoning on the day of judgment will be light upon those who used to reckon with themselves in the world. This is a reminder that taking yourself to account is not a burden. It is a mercy, a shield that protects you from regret later. Imagine a businessman who never checks his accounts, never tracks his debts, and never reviews his spending. Eventually, he will face disaster. But a wise businessman examines his records daily so that when the final audit comes, he has nothing to fear. Similarly, our lives are like an account book. Each day is a page filled with deeds, some good, some bad. If we are not reviewing those pages regularly, we may arrive on the day of judgment with a record we are unprepared to face. Self-accountability also builds discipline. When you become used to questioning yourself, you develop the ability to say no to your desires. You stop excusing your laziness and start pushing yourself to do better. You begin to feel uneasy when you waste time or fall into sin, because your heart has been trained to check itself. Over time, this discipline becomes a habit, and habits shape destiny. Those who achieve greatness in this world and the next are not those who lived carelessly, but those who disciplined themselves to walk on the straight path, even when it was difficult. My dear brothers and sisters, focusing on yourself and practicing self-accountability is not about perfection. It is about progress. You may stumble, you may fall, you may repeat mistakes, but the one who holds himself accountable never gives up. He acknowledges his weakness, seeks forgiveness, and keeps moving forward. That is why self-accountability is the key to growth, because it transforms every mistake into a lesson, every failure into a stepping stone, and every weakness into an opportunity to rely more on Allah. If we make this a daily habit, then by the mercy of Allah, we will rise on the day of judgment with hearts purified and souls at peace. Silence is one of the most powerful qualities a believer can practice, yet it is often underestimated in a world where everyone wants to be heard, noticed, and followed. The Prophet taught us that whoever believes in Allah and in the last day should speak good or remain silent. These words contain deep wisdom because they remind us that not every thought deserves to be spoken, not every opinion needs to be shared, and not every conversation is worth entering. Silence, when used correctly, becomes a shield that guards the heart, protects the tongue, and preserves our dignity. The sins of the tongue are among the most dangerous because they slip out so easily yet carry heavy consequences. Backbiting, slander, lying, mocking, gossip, harsh words, and even excessive useless talk can weigh heavily on our scales in the hereafter. A single sentence may break someone's heart, destroy a relationship, or create conflict between families. One careless comment can spread like wildfire, causing damage that cannot be undone. When we choose silence instead of adding fuel to the fire, we protect not only ourselves but also those around us. Silence saves us from regrets that words often bring. How many times have we wished to take back something we said in anger or frustration? But it was too late. Silence spares us that pain. Silence also purifies the heart. When a person constantly speaks, argues, and debates, their heart becomes restless and distracted. But when a person learns to remain quiet, their heart becomes calm, allowing them to focus on remembrance of Allah. The greatest benefit of silence is that it opens the door to dhikr. Instead of filling the air with unnecessary talk, a believer can fill his tongue with words of remembrance, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. These words nourish the soul, unlike idle chatter, which only drains it. This is why many of the righteous predecessors preferred silence, using their tongues only for what brought them closer to Allah. Silence is not weakness. In fact, it requires more strength to remain silent when provoked than to respond with anger. Anyone can shout back, insult, or argue, but it takes true patience to stay quiet and control the tongue. The Prophet said, "The strong man is not the one who overcomes people with his strength, but the strong man is the one who controls himself while in anger." Silence in moments of anger is a sign of strength, maturity, and wisdom. It shows that you value peace more than your ego and you value Allah's reward more than winning an argument. Silence also protects us from arrogance. When people speak too much, they often fall into the trap of showing off their knowledge, exaggerating their stories, or seeking attention. But silence humbles us, reminding us that we do not need to prove ourselves to others. A silent person often earns more respect than one who constantly talks, because silence conveys dignity and self-control. The less you speak, the less room there is for mistakes, and the more people value the words you do choose to say. Another wisdom of silence. Wisdom of silence is that it teaches us to listen. In conversations, most people are not truly listening. They are simply waiting for their turn to speak. But when you practice silence, you learn to understand others deeply, to hear their struggles, and to reflect on their words. This makes you more compassionate and empathetic, because silence allows you to give others the gift of your attention. Listening is an act of kindness, and silence makes it possible. There are times when silence becomes worship. For example, when a gathering is filled with gossip, staying silent becomes an act of obedience. When an argument is about to break out, staying silent becomes a form of patience. When someone wrongs you, and you restrain yourself from harsh words, your silence becomes a means of reward. Even when you are unsure about what is right or wrong to say, silence is safer than risking a sin. Silence in these moments is not empty. It is full of reward, full of wisdom, and full of protection. Yet silence must not be misunderstood as avoidance of truth. Islam teaches us to remain silent from evil and falsehood, but it also commands us to speak when justice requires it. Silence is not always correct. There are times when speaking up is necessary, such as defending the oppressed or clarifying the truth. But in most daily situations, silence is the wiser choice, because speaking unnecessarily often leads to harm. Knowing when to speak and when to remain silent is a sign of maturity and faith. My dear brothers and sisters, if we make silence a habit, we will find peace entering our hearts. Our relationships will improve, our dignity will rise, and our tongues will be saved from sins. The world encourages us to speak louder, argue stronger, and always give our opinion. But Islam encourages us to guard our tongue, because it is one of the greatest tests we will face. On the day of judgment, our words will be weighed, and many will regret the moments they chose speech over silence. So let us train ourselves today. If we have good to say, let us say it. If not, let us remain silent. In that silence, there is protection, wisdom, and closeness to Allah. Inner strength is born when a person learns to focus on themselves instead of scattering their energy on others. In today's world, most people are caught up in comparison, envy, and constant observation of what everyone else is doing. Social media has amplified this disease. We scroll endlessly through the lives of others, comparing their achievements, wealth, or beauty with our own. This creates jealousy, dissatisfaction, and even arrogance. But Islam calls us to a path of self-reflection and personal growth. The Prophet reminded us that true wealth is not having many possessions, but contentment of the heart. When you focus inward, when you stop wasting energy on the lives of others, you begin to find that strength inside you which makes you independent of people and dependent only on Allah. The energy we spend on criticizing others, competing with them, or complaining about them could be used to improve our own relationship with Allah. Imagine if every minute spent in gossip was replaced with dhikr, or every thought of envy was replaced with gratitude. A believer's inner strength grows when he redirects his focus to his own responsibilities. Instead of worrying about who has more money, he asks himself, am I fulfilling my salah? Instead of wasting time on who is more popular, he asks, am I pleasing Allah in private? This shift in focus transforms the heart from restless to peaceful. Because the believer is no longer chasing people's approval, but striving for Allah's pleasure. Focusing on yourself also means taking control of your own actions, emotions, and intentions. You cannot control how others live, but you can control how you react. When someone insults you, you have a choice. Do you waste your strength retaliating, or do you rise above it, remain silent, and leave it to Allah? True strength lies in discipline, not reaction. The one who focuses inward understands that his dignity does not depend on how others treat him, but on how he responds in the sight of Allah. By choosing patience, forgiveness, and silence in the face of provocation, a believer protects his inner peace and grows stronger with every trial. There is also a deep connection between focus and clarity. When a person is busy looking at others, their mind becomes cluttered with endless comparisons and distractions. But when you focus on yourself, clarity emerges. You see your weaknesses clearly, you understand your strengths, and you know what needs improvement. This clarity allows you to set goals for your own spiritual and personal growth. You begin to value your time differently because you realize that every day is an opportunity to become better than yesterday. You stop asking, "What are they doing?" and start asking, "What am I doing to get closer to Allah?" That question itself gives you strength because it keeps your heart alive and active. Focusing on yourself does not mean becoming selfish or disconnected from others. Islam teaches us to care for our families, our communities, and the Ummah as a whole. But the point is that real change begins with the self. You cannot guide others if you are lost yourself. You cannot advise others if your own actions contradict your words. By focusing on yourself, you become a source of inspiration for others, not through speeches or arguments, but through your character, discipline, and sincerity. People are naturally drawn to someone who radiates peace and strength, and that comes only from inner focus. Another wisdom in focusing on yourself is that it frees you from the endless chase of the dunya. When you stop comparing, you stop competing for things that do not matter. The world teaches us to compete in wealth, status, and recognition, but the Quran teaches us to compete in good deeds. Focusing inward shifts your competition from material possessions to spiritual achievements. You begin to compete not with your neighbor's house or your friend's career, but with your own past self. You ask, am I praying with more khushu today than yesterday? Am I giving more in charity this year than last year? This is the competition that builds true inner strength because it pushes you closer to Allah. A believer who focuses inward also develops resilience. Life is full of challenges, loss, betrayal, hardship, and pain. If you spend your energy blaming others for your struggles, you will always feel weak. But when you focus inward, you recognize that every hardship is a test from Allah, and your response determines your growth. Instead of asking, "What me?" you ask, "How can I respond in a way that pleases Allah?" This mindset transforms difficulties into opportunities for strength. Every trial becomes a stepping stone that builds patience, trust, and reliance on Allah. This is the essence of inner strength, facing life's storms without breaking, because your heart is anchored to Allah. My dear brothers and sisters, when you focus on yourself, you stop living for the eyes of people and start living for the sight of Allah. You realize that your true worth is not in likes, comments, or recognition, but in the sincerity of your deeds. The believer who focuses inward finds strength in solitude, peace in silence, and growth in self-reflection. He is not distracted by the noise of the world because his heart is busy with Allah. That is inner strength. To be calm in chaos, to be patient in trials, and to be consistent in worship. And all of it begins the moment you stop looking outward and start focusing inward. Silence is wisdom, And this truth is deeply rooted in the teachings of Islam. In a time where words are thrown around carelessly, silence has become rare and undervalued. Yet, when we look at the guidance of the Quran and Sunnah, we find that silence is often more powerful than speech. The Prophet said, part of the perfection of one's Islam is his leaving that which does not concern him. This hadith reminds us that not every matter requires our opinion. Not every conversation needs our input, and not every situation demands our voice. Silence in such moments is not weakness, it is wisdom. It shows control over the tongue, discipline of the heart, and maturity of the mind. When a believer chooses silence, he protects himself from countless mistakes. The tongue is small in size, but capable of causing the greatest harm. How many times do people destroy their relationships, lose respect, or commit major sins simply because they could not remain quiet? Gossip, backbiting, slander, lying, mocking, all of these flow from the tongue, and most of them could be avoided by silence. The wise person knows that every word he utters is recorded by the angels, and he will be held accountable for it on the day of judgment. This awareness makes him cautious, choosing silence unless his words will bring benefit. In this way, silence becomes a shield that protects his record from unnecessary burdens. Silence is also wisdom because it allows space for reflection. When a person is always talking, arguing, or expressing opinions, he has no time to reflect on his own thoughts or to truly listen to others. But when he is silent, his mind and heart open, he begins to notice what is happening inside him and around him. He learns to observe before reacting, to think before responding, and to understand before speaking. This reflection leads to better decisions, stronger faith, and a calmer heart. Wisdom is not found in quick reactions, but in thoughtful silence that precedes meaningful action. The Quran itself emphasizes the value of silence in certain moments. The story of Maryam, Mary, peace be upon her, is a powerful example. When she gave birth to Isa, Jesus, peace be upon him, Allah instructed her not to speak, but to remain silent and point to her child instead. In that moment, her silence carried more weight than any words she could have said, because Allah himself made Isa speak in the cradle. This teaches us that sometimes silence achieves more than speech ever could, and that true wisdom lies in trusting Allah and holding back when words are not needed. Another reason silence is wisdom is that it prevents regret. How many times have we spoken out of anger or haste and later wished we had stayed quiet? Words once spoken cannot be taken back. They may heal with time, but the wound they cause often lingers. Silence, on the other hand, never leaves regret. No one ever feels pain for staying silent in a situation where speaking could have caused harm. The wise person understands this and chooses silence as his default, speaking only when there is clear benefit and reward in doing so. Silence is also a form of humility. Many people love to talk because it gives them a sense of importance, as if their words must always be heard. But wisdom teaches us that silence often speaks louder than words. The one who remains silent is not seeking attention, and this humility makes him more respected. People tend to listen more carefully when a silent person finally chooses to speak because his words carry weight. This shows that silence does not reduce a person's influence, it enhances it. Furthermore, silence can be a form of patience. When you are wronged, your immediate reaction may be to respond with harsh words or defend yourself aggressively. But silence in those moments is an act of strength. It shows that you place your trust in Allah to defend you and that you value peace more than pride. This kind of silence is wisdom because it transforms anger into patience and prevents situations from escalating into greater conflict. At the same time, silence teaches us to choose our words carefully. When we practice silence, we begin to value speech We learn that words should heal, not hurt, uplift, not break, guide, not mislead. Every word becomes intentional and thoughtful rather than careless and empty. This is why silence is wisdom. It trains us to make our words meaningful, rare, and valuable. My dear brothers and sisters, wisdom is not in how much we speak, but in how much we hold back. Silence is wisdom because it saves us from sins, gives us space for reflection, protects us from regret, cultivates humility, and strengthens patience. The Prophet said, "He who remains silent saves himself." These simple words summarize an ocean of wisdom. In a world where everyone is desperate to be heard, let us be among those who are wise enough to stay silent, except when our words bring benefit and draw us closer to Allah. That silence will be our protection in this life and our salvation in the next. Allah loves sincerity in every action, and He loves the effort we put forth, even when no one else sees it. This is the essence of true faith, that we worship Allah not for the eyes of people, not for recognition, and not for praise, but for His sake alone. When a believer focuses on improving himself silently, working on his flaws in private, and striving to get closer to Allah without seeking attention, he becomes beloved to Allah. This is because sincerity, or ikhlas, is the soul of every deed. Without sincerity, even the greatest act becomes hollow, but with sincerity, even the smallest act becomes heavy in the scales on the day of judgment. The Quran reminds us that Allah does not look at our appearances or wealth, but at our hearts and deeds. This means that what truly matters is not how people perceive us, but how pure our intentions are in front of Allah. A person may appear pious to the world, reciting Quran beautifully, speaking with wisdom, or giving in charity publicly. But if in his heart he seeks admiration rather than Allah's pleasure, his efforts carry no weight with Allah. On the other hand, someone who gives a small amount in charity secretly, who prays long at night unseen, or who sheds tears in dua when no one is watching, this person is honored by Allah because his sincerity is pure. The effort itself is beloved to Allah. Even if the results are not visible, we live in a society that glorifies outcomes. People celebrate success, wealth, recognition, and visible achievements. But Allah rewards us for our effort, not the outcome. If you struggle to wake up for Fajr, and you try every day, even if sometimes you fail, Allah sees your effort. If you strive to memorize Quran and struggle with pronunciation, your reward is doubled because of the effort you put in. The Prophet said, the one who recites the Quran and stammers in it, finding it difficult, will have two rewards. This shows that Allah values not perfection, but the struggle and sincerity behind our efforts. Sincere effort is also powerful because it builds consistency. When you work on yourself quietly, without the need to show others, you build habits that last. Public actions can sometimes be motivated by people's praise, but when you act sincerely for Allah, your motivation is pure, and you are more likely to remain consistent. For example, someone who prays tahajjud only when others are awake may stop when he is alone. But the one who wakes up in the middle of the night, unseen by anyone except Allah, does so purely for His sake. That consistency strengthens the heart, increases faith, and brings a special closeness to Allah that cannot be explained in words. Silent efforts are often the most powerful because they are protected from riyah, showing off. The moment people know of our good deeds, the danger of pride and seeking recognition enters. That is why the righteous before us used to hide their worship as much as possible. Some of them would cry at night in prayer, but wipe their faces before dawn so that their families would not notice. Some would give charity secretly, leaving it at people's doors without anyone knowing the giver. Their focus was not on being known by people, but being known by Allah. And it is these silent, sincere efforts that Allah loves the most. Sincere effort also transforms the heart. When you do something purely for Allah, you feel a sweetness in worship that is absent when you do it for recognition. That sweetness gives peace to the soul, removes anxiety, and strengthens Iman. The believer who strives silently for Allah feels a connection that cannot be broken by people's opinions. He does not get discouraged if others do not notice his efforts, nor does he become arrogant if they do. His focus is only on Allah, and that focus gives him strength, peace, and dignity. It is important to remember that Allah is Al-Shakur, the most appreciative. Even the smallest effort made sincerely is valued by Him. If you silently hold back an angry word for His sake, He appreciates it. If you forgive someone in your heart without announcing it, He appreciates it. If you give a little charity quietly, He appreciates it. Nothing is lost with Allah. The world may ignore your struggles, your sacrifices, and your silent battles, but Allah never ignores them. He sees every tear, every effort, every silent dua, and He loves the servant who does it only for Him. My dear brothers and sisters, true success is not in being seen, but in being sincere. Allah loves those who struggle for Him quietly, who focus on their inner growth, and who purify their intentions with every step. Let us strive to be among those whose deeds are hidden treasures, whose efforts are unseen by people but known to Allah, and whose sincerity makes them beloved to their Creator. In the end, it is not how much we achieve in the eyes of people that matters, but how sincerely we strive in the eyes of Allah. And that sincere effort, no matter how small, is never wasted. Avoiding arguments is one of the most underrated ways to protect one's faith and dignity. Yet it is a principle emphasized in Islam with great importance. Arguments are often fueled by ego, anger, and the need to prove oneself right, rather than the pursuit of truth or wisdom. The Prophet said, "I guarantee a house in paradise for the one who leaves off arguing, even if he is right." This hadith alone shows us how dangerous arguments are to our Iman, and how much reward there is in simply stepping back. To walk away from an argument, even when you know you are correct, is not weakness, but a powerful act of self-control. It proves that you value peace, humility, and the pleasure of Allah over your ego. Arguments rarely lead to good outcomes. Instead of softening hearts, they often harden them. Instead of building understanding, they fuel resentment. The more a person argues, the more likely they are to lose patience, raise their voice, and say things they later regret. Arguments open the door to anger, mockery, pride, and even hatred, all of which are destructive to the soul. By avoiding arguments, a believer shields himself from these poisons and protects the purity of his heart. Silence in the face of conflict is not defeat, it is preservation of faith. Another danger of arguments is that they waste valuable time and energy. Hours can be lost in pointless debates about matters that do not benefit us in this world or the next. People argue about wealth, politics, status, and opinions, yet at the end of the day, nothing changes except their hearts become more divided. Time is one of the greatest blessings Allah has given us, and to waste it on fruitless disputes is a sign of heedlessness. When a believer chooses to avoid arguments, he reclaims that time and energy, redirecting it towards worship, self-improvement, and beneficial knowledge. This is why avoiding arguments is a sign of maturity. It shows that you know where your efforts truly matter. Avoiding arguments also protects relationships. Many families, friendships, and communities have been torn apart because people could not hold back in disagreements. A single heated exchange can create bitterness that lingers for years. Yet all of this could have been avoided by simply choosing silence and patience instead of escalation. A believer who avoids arguments preserves unity and keeps the bonds of brotherhood strong. The Prophet emphasized the importance of unity in the Ummah, and one of the most effective ways to maintain it is by avoiding unnecessary disputes. When you let go of the need to win an argument, you often win something much greater: the trust and respect of others. Furthermore, avoiding arguments cultivates humility. The human ego craves to be right, to be acknowledged, and to be respected. But when you deliberately step back from an argument, you are humbling your ego for the sake of Allah. You are reminding yourself that your worth does not depend on proving yourself in front of people, but on how Allah sees you. This humility strengthens your faith because it aligns your heart with sincerity rather than pride. It also makes you more approachable and gentle, which are qualities loved by Allah. Avoiding arguments is not about silence in the face of injustice or remaining quiet when truth must be spoken. Islam teaches us to stand firm for justice, to advise others sincerely, and to defend what is right. But there is a difference between speaking truth with wisdom and falling into endless disputes that only inflame the ego. The believer learns to recognize the difference. When truth needs to be spoken, he speaks it calmly, respectfully, and with the intention of pleasing Allah, not of winning an argument. But when the matter is petty, unnecessary, or likely to create more harm than good, he steps back and chooses silence. This balance is what keeps the heart pure and the faith strong. There is also a spiritual beauty in leaving off arguments. It gives peace to the heart. People who argue frequently are often restless, angry, and unsettled because their minds are constantly filled with conflict. But those who avoid arguments carry peace within them because they are not entangled in battles of ego. They live with lighter hearts, knowing they have nothing to prove to anyone but Allah. This inner peace reflects outwardly, making them calmer in their dealings with others and more focused on their worship. My dear brothers and sisters, Amen is not just about praying and fasting, but also about how we conduct ourselves with people. Avoiding arguments is a sign of strong Amen because it shows that you prioritize harmony, humility, and sincerity over pride and contention. The Prophet promised a house in paradise for the one who abandons arguing even when he is right. This is a promise worth striving for. Let us train ourselves to let go of disputes, to choose silence over escalation, and to prioritize our faith over our egos. In doing so, we will not only protect our iman, but also find peace in our hearts, dignity in our character, and reward with Allah in the hereafter.